We're in the middle of chapter 17, where we are finally addressing what the Alter Rebbe tells us on the title page is the entire purpose of Tanya, which is this pasuk. We just had it in the parsha a few weeks ago of Kikara ve'lecha hadavar miyoid b'ficha lavav chalaseisei. Now, the standard common interpretation of that pasuk is, behold the matter, which the singular term matter means it covers everything, although just to fully flesh it out, there are those who interpret that the matter is a reference specifically or exclusively to tshuva. But our understanding is that it covers everything: Torah, mitzvahs, love Hashem, love your fellow Jew, kosher, everything is very near to you, in your mouth and in your heart, that you may do it. Now, that may seem like a pretty straightforward kind of pasuk. Okay, you can do this. And only through the first 16 chapters, well, the Alter Rebbe has laid out for us that what we mean by Belvavcha, in your heart, would seem to suggest that it is to have exclusive, and that's the key word, exclusive love for Hashem. Does not only not seem very near, it doesn't seem near, it doesn't even seem possible for us. And the Gemara itself acknowledges this, that even fearing Hashem, which is a little easier, is not such a small thing. And loving Hashem, or loving only Hashem, and that's kind of the key, is certainly not a, quote, small thing. So we keep on saying it's very near to you. How is it near, and what is the difference between near and very near? Another little nuance. So based on what we have said until now, the Alter Rebbe has essentially, I don't want to say conceded, but I'll say conceded, that we are not going to be a tzaddik. We don't have the capability of being a tzaddik. Not because we're not trying hard enough, and not because we're lazy. It's like a gift, like being a musical or athletic. It's a gift. It needs to be developed. Even those who have the gift have to develop. And of course, you never know. Maybe you do have that gift. And even if you don't have that gift, life is dynamic and ever changing, and Hashem can always reconfigure things. At the end of the day, so to speak, in the look back, it's not likely that I'm going to. And that's the challenge to this pasuk. So the Alter Rebbe now is giving us a whole different understanding of this pasuk. So to take it word by word, we would read it as key because every Jew, simply by the fact that they have a nefesh elokis, a godly soul, ipso facto, they have a desire to be aligned with the infinity of Hashem, just as a child intuitively wants to be aligned with their parent because it is their origin. And even in the natural world, in botany and animals, they are innately drawn to be realigned with their origin. The seed goes back to the soil, the fruit goes back to the tree, the animal is aligned with its parent, and so on, not because of some social conditioning. It simply is intuitive to its very identity. Similarly, a Jew, again, even if they are not Torah observant, and even if they are not in absolute alliance with every mitzvah, it is simply in their intuitive desire to be in perfect alignment with their origin, and their origin is the infinity of Hashem. So the second chapter of Tanya, where the Alter Rebbe lays out that in addition to being a human, a Jew also has a distinctive second soul that separates him from the Gentile, not based on behavior, not based on a belief system. Simply, this is his innate character, is why, even though that love can get buried deep within him, it is karov. Now, the word karov here is really kind of becomes the tell, because the common translation of the word karov means close, like I am closer to Skokie than I am to Milwaukee. It's just an issue of proximity. A relative is called a karov, someone with whom you are close. However, of course, just to use that as an example, a person can be closer with a friend than they are with a relative, but there's still a karov to their relative and not to their best friend. We know this even biologically. If a person needed to find someone who was a biological match, their far more likely, I mean, exponentially more likely to be a closer match with their sibling than with their neighbor, even if they may speak to their neighbor more commonly, even if they may be more socially aligned or philosophically aligned with their neighbor than they are with their sibling. So karov doesn't only suggest proximity, it's more like the word bikir becha, within you. It is within your capacity. This is how the Alter Rebbe is reading the pasuk, because it is in your innate capacity. It is in your innate identity, better than even capacity. It's in your innate identity. It comes with the packaging. That's how you come out of the factory. It's part of your basic standard equipment. So therefore, this matter is everything of Torah and mitzvahs, and it's mi'od. Now here comes the key. What is the difference between something that is karov and something that is karov mi'od? Near and very near. And very, very near. I mean, what is the difference here? Is it just a matter of quantity? Is it just for emphasis? Is it just like another spiteful, this is not just close, it's very close. It doesn't seem even close. So the difference between karov and karov mi'od is something can be karov, it can be within your natural skill set, but not easily accessible. So again, if you think about, if you work hard enough, you can master a foreign language. If you work hard enough, you can climb a mountain. If you work hard enough, you can play the flute. If you work hard enough, you can achieve some other accomplishment. It is within you, but it's not very within you. It's not accessible to you. And here the Alter Rebbe's argument is that it is easily accessible. It is easily ignitable. This time of year in particular, we talk about this a lot, that the Jewish person who perhaps is not aware of their Jewishness throughout the year, and they do not actively participate in any consciously Jewish activities throughout the year. They simply are going about living only within their humanity. Suddenly they become very triggered in a positive way, and their Yiddishkeit becomes very important to them. This is the message of, excuse me, are you Jewish? Do a mitzvah, put on tefillin, shake the lulav, light Shabbos candles, whatever it is. We become easily, when I say easy, it's not even the right word. It's not about easy or hard. It is accessible to us. And as we'll see, it can be activated in a variety of matters. It does take effort. So the difference between karov and karov mi'od, we could argue, is karov means it's within your skill set. Karov mi'od means it's discoverable within your skill set. It is triggerable. You can exhume it from within you and not just say, well, I know, but it's too hard for me to do that. It's buried too deeply within me for me to dig that up. And then we say, it's beficha, in your mouth, and mouth being a reference to the verbal mitzvahs, like saying the Shema, saying hello to people, saying good morning, being nice, whatever it is. Certainly there's many prohibited verbal mitzvahs, slander and lying, etc. And beficha bilvavcha. Now the key there is that there's a vav, an and, that links beficha bilvavcha, in your mouth and in your heart. Why is it listed as and? Meaning it's enough to get your heart stimulated to the degree lasoy so that you can get the job done. That, again, a person's brain in his head, remember we talked about that, that's not just some sort of snarky comment, it's got his brain in his head. Where else would it be? But it means he has not lost control of his conscious thought, and he is capable of willfully thinking about something and making it real. So, beficha ubilvavcha la soisoi, in your mouth and your heart, so you will get it done. So you will accomplish it. So it will be completed. That becomes the issue. So it will be done. So we can back up here and reread the verse, that since every Jew by mere virtue of the fact that he is a Jew and he has this actual part of Hashem innate within his identity, has the ability to stimulate it to the point that it will express itself, at least to the degree that he can activate it verbally and enough love to get the job done. Now, does it mean that I only have love for Hashem and I don't also like self-indulgence? Probably not. Will it always be a battle and I'll rather sit on the couch than get up and do what I have to do? Probably. Maybe not. Maybe we'll touch it, as we'll see. Maybe there'll be those moments when I will be able to not have any challenge at all. But they're not likely, and they're not likely to last. And even if I think they are, I always have to be on guard that they not fall apart. So beficha ubevavcha, enough lasoisa to get the job done. Lasoisa to get the job done. So based on all of this, we're going to pick up on the period. Actually, we're going to back up a little bit. It's the chitas for the 5th of Shvat for a leap year, and it says v'zeh kol ha'adam. And this is the entirety of man, or something along those lines. So hopefully you can find it. We're about a third of the way into the chapter. V'zeh kol ha'adam. Here we go. You ready? V'zeh, and this is kol ha'adam, the entirety of man. Now, the Alter Rebbe here is addressing two possible pushbacks of concern. One is, what's the point? Why do I have to keep battling and battling, and it's so hard? And look, I have gotten off the couch every day for 20 years, and every day I still want to stay on the couch. So the world would say, hey, give it up. You're not going to be able to do this. This is not in your skill set. You're not capable of this. Stop pretending that you are a virtuous person. And the fact that it's still so hard is evidence that you should give up. Now, that would be a reasonable expectation for accomplishing, playing the piano. If you've been practicing piano every day for 5 years and you still can't play the piano, well, maybe it's time to move on. But here, we're not talking about accomplishment. Here, we're talking about being in alliance with the infinity of Hashem. So even if I feel like, well, it's still a struggle, do not think that that is somehow an indication that I have failed. Because as we say here, v'zeh kol ha'adam, this is the entirety of Adam. And remember, whenever we see that word Adam, it's not just a generic term for human being. It is the capacity to have the Aleph, the oneness of Hashem, dominate and control the dam, which means blood, but in our context, it means our biological imperative. So I get hungry. My mind says, I'm not eating. I get angry. My mind says, I'm not lashing out. I get lazy. My mind says, I'm going to get up and do it anyway. Because I am Adam. I am not simply dumb. That is the difference between an animal and a human being. An animal simply reacts to its emotional charge. It feels it, it wants it, it does it. That's what an animal does. But we can and are expected to not be animal, but to be Adam, the Aleph over the dam. Ki, because hayom lasoisam ksiv. Why is that sufficient? Meaning it feels like this is so disappointing that I'm constantly having to struggle with it. It's constantly a difficulty. So the Alter Rebbe supports this based on a pasuk that is expounded upon in the Talmud that says today, which is a reference to this world, not just this day of the week, but it means while we are here in this physical world, it's all about the execution of our duties. Hayom lasoisam. So lest the person feel like, why is this of value? It's not deeply meaningful to me. It's not transformative. I'm still struggling with it. Maybe this isn't for me. We should remember that we're doing this in the service of something greater. So, we all know this at a simplest level. If I hire someone to do a service, whether it's drive me to the airport or do my taxes, sure, it's wonderful if they love doing it and it's their greatest passion. But I want it to get done. It needs to get done. And if they say, well, I don't find this as my greatest passion, I'd still rather sit on the couch. Well, then they're thinking about whether they like it. They're not thinking about whether it's meaningful to me. So if we think about what's meaningful to Hashem, what is Hashem getting out of all of this? So lest we think, well, Hashem probably not getting much out of this because it's such a struggle, the Alter Rebbe reminds us, based on this pasuk as it's expounded upon in the Talmud, that it's now is about the doing. Now, to be fair, so to speak, to step back for a moment, remember the Alter Rebbe's original audience, and even to this day, are people who are doing the mitzvahs. Meaning, if somebody comes to the Alter Rebbe, because Tanya is a response to people constantly coming to the Alter Rebbe with their questions, and they say, I don't feel close to God. And he says, do you do mitzvahs? Well, no, I'm going to wait till I feel close to God until I do mitzvahs. Now, that is what could seem like, I mean, I'm phrasing it perhaps in such an obvious way that it sounds silly, but it might feel that way. The story about the person who said, I have no friends. And they said, well, what are you doing to be a friend? Well, what do you mean? I don't have any friends. When I have friends, then I'll do things for them. Well, if instead you'll do things for people first, then you'll have friends. If you get up to get yourself a drink of water and you bring someone else a drink of water, you'll have friends. If you're going to wait until they're your friends, till you bring them a drink of water, you're not likely to have too many friends. In fact, I know I'm going down one of my rabbit holes here, but the second section of Tanya, which we'll get to if I stop talking so much, is the Shar HaYichud V'Amunah, where the Alter Rebbe talks basically about Hashem. And the Alter Rebbe originally was going to publish that first, figuring that how could a person talk about their relationship with Hashem until they know Hashem? And there he talks about the oneness of Hashem and so on and so forth. But then the Alter Rebbe realized, changed his mind, re-strategized, and said, no, first we're going to be in a relationship with Hashem. Then we'll learn about Hashem, a kind of a we will do and then we'll understand strategy. And that's what the Alter Rebbe is employing here. Meaning, even though he seems to be saying, look, just, hunker down and do what you're told, and don't worry about whether or not you feel it. He's not making that argument. He's saying, lest you feel like this whole thing is meaningless and pointless, know ye that it is quite meaningful to Hashem and in his infinity. And in the future, the rest of that pasuk goes, or that reading goes, we will receive your reward. Now, what is lamachar? What is tomorrow? It doesn't mean the day after today. It means in the world to come. And what is the reward? It's not like this sort of cartoonish vision where a person gets rewarded with all the things and joys that they bypassed in this world. So if we budget wisely, we'll have more fun waiting for us on the other side. But what is the true reward is the sense of alliance. I mean, it's much like we talk about on Yom Kippur, right? The rest of the year, it's about compliance. And Yom Kippur is about alliance, because on Yom Kippur, there's nothing to do. There's no shofar to sound. There's no lulav to shake. There isn't an action to do. It's simply about being in alliance with the infinity of Hashem. That's a taste of the world to come, which, again, just to take that analogy one step further, why we say that in the world to come, there is no eating and there is no drinking. Now, if we have this, again, somewhat childish perspective, oh, in the world to come, then I have, ice cream and cookies and all kinds of fun stuff. Well, then I might as well have that now. Oh, but you got better ice cream then. Well, then it becomes a little silly. But when our understanding is that the reward is not toys, the reward is the oneness and the alliance and the infinity of our relationship with Hashem, then, like we would say, now we understand what you're talking about. As explained in other places. So again, on the one hand, the Alter Rebbe is comforting us, lest we feel like, well, this isn't really doing much for me, or is this really all that valuable since I'm not feeling all this alliance with Hashem and so on. The Alter Rebbe is saying yes. And if you don't feel alliance, that is not an indication that you're not doing it right. The fact that you don't always feel connected and wake up with enthusiasm and jump out of bed and can't wait to go and do mitzvahs should not be an indication that somehow you have failed. Don't fall for that. That's basically a trick of the Yetzer Hara to discourage you from doing what you're supposed to do by saying, well, the fact that I'm still struggling must mean that it's worthless. It's very meaningful to Hashem. And the Alter Rebbe says, we're not just going to sort of leave you there in the lurch, feeling like, well, okay, just go through the drudgery day after day after day. Rather, we're going to be focusing on how we're going to get you to feel that alliance as well. and know that it won't be perfect, and know that there'll be this fluctuation. So what is that strategy? So the Alter Rebbe continues and he says, "V'amoyach sholit b'tivay b'toldasa achol hasmoli shebelev v'alpi v'akol eivarim shein kli hamaisa." Now, here the Alter Rebbe gives us a basic truism. The mind is authoritative over the heart. Now, again, we're not here to study biology, but we're just using this as an entry point into understanding our idea. Now, what does this mean? Just like a person is a upright human being, and that is considered our superiority to an animal that walks on all fours, and our head is higher than our heart and higher than the lower parts of our body, which indicates that our head can control our heart. Now, what does this mean? We all know this intuitively, right? So the kid is all scared. So we tell them, look, there's nothing to be scared of. You see, I'm here. Whatever it is, we give them words of comfort in the hopes that their mind will control their heart. Or I really want that. Well, let me explain to you why that's unhealthy or unsafe and so on. So we give them logic to control the heart. Now, if they're a child, they may say, well, what do you mean? I want ice cream. I don't want to hear a lecture about cavities. Or I'm scared. I don't want. And again, gradually, we get to this point. I mean, I think this is something that we can all appreciate just at an intuitive level, that our mind can control our heart. Now, at first, it may have to override our heart. So my heart says, I want to eat that, do that, yell, whatever it is. And the mind says, we're not going to do it. I know you really want it, but we're not, because we are Adam. We are not driven exclusively by our biological imperative. And that's the difference between a human being and an animal. An animal, which again, sometimes human beings act that way, they say, well, I want it, so I'm going to do it, right? And of course, if you lecture the cow why you shouldn't eat those tomatoes because you're saving them for later, he's going to eat the tomatoes. And sometimes people act that way. They just act out of pure impulse and so on. And yet, again, as we understand, the mind can rule the heart. Now, there's two levels here, or there's two characteristics of how that mind can rule the heart. One is it overrules the heart. That's it. The heart says, I want it. The mind says, you're not doing it. That's it. And the mind is stronger than the heart. There's no such thing as I couldn't help myself. That is a truism of Tanya. There's no such thing as I couldn't help myself. I am not a victim of my impulses. I crossed 10 yellow lines before, I don't know what happened. It just happened. There were 10 yellow lines that were crossed till I got into that spot where I couldn't control myself, which we will discuss here coming up, as the Alter Rebbe will talk about. Here, the Alter Rebbe has explained a whole other characteristic, that not only can the mind overrule the heart, but since, again, that love, and again, when we say love, we don't mean love like I love swimming, like it's my favorite thing, but I wish to be associated with Hashem more than I wish to be associated with my own indulgences. It's more important to me to be in alliance. And again, we probably all notice people who they don't have this straightened out, and they'd rather be right than be in alliance with their friends or their family. It's more important for them, for their validation, than it is for their peace and so on. And they say, well, I'd rather be right and disconnected as opposed to I'd rather be connected even if I am, quote, wrong. Now, here the Alter Rebbe is saying that the mind can shape the heart. That since in the mind I know that I want to be connected with Hashem. So again, the simplest example. The guy sitting on the couch, they say, okay, we need you for the minyan, we need you to shake the whatever it is, whatever mitzvah it is. So the animal soul says, well, I want to sit on the couch. So the godly soul says, well, we have to go and do this mitzvah. So the godly soul, which is in the mind, can say, I'm taking control of this situation, and we're getting up and we're doing it. Or the godly soul can say, I know that I want to be aligned with Hashem, what we call love. That's what I know. And deep in the heart, I also feel that. So the mind can transform the heart. I'll use the word, it can mature the heart to where the heart not only is dragged, kicking and screaming, I don't want to go, but too bad you're going, but it goes along at least somewhat willfully. So it's not dominating the heart, but it is enough to manifest it in the behavior, the three garments, what I consciously think about, what I say and what I do. The mind can not only overrule the heart, and this is really the core to Chabad, meaning, as we've talked about many times, every community is struggling with the same issue. How do I get myself to be in alliance when I don't feel like I can't wait to do it? So one school of thought is just that. It's just a school. That's it. You just do it. You just learn Torah. That's all that counts. Just enough of this, what you're feeling, just wipe that out. Another school, again, I'm overly simplifying, but it illustrates the point. Another school of thought is you're going to bombard the character with so much joy. You're going to make Shabbos so much fun. You're going to make it filled with singing and dancing and celebrating that you're going to be attracted to it more than sitting on the couch. Well, the message of Chabad is the mind is going to shape the heart. One says mind and forget the heart. The other says we'll bombard the heart. The Alter Rebbe's message, that the school of Chabad, is the mind will shape the heart. It's not that the two are separate lanes. One will shape the other. That is the depth that the Alter Rebbe is adding here in this phrase, the moyach, the mind, again, the seat of godliness, where the godly is more at home, will cure, shape the heart. Al-Chol Hasmoli Shabalev, on the left side, and the mouth, and all the body parts. Im loy mishu rasha be'emes. Now here the Alter Rebbe introduces an idea that may be lurking in a person's thoughts about somebody who could potentially forfeit this capacity, which the Alter Rebbe describes as the rasha be'emes, a new term. We have not seen this term before. We did talk about it, but we have not seen it before. Here's where it gets laid out. Now, generally speaking, as we started out with the categorization, and as we talked about, the value of the categorization is not so much for where am I? Am I good? Am I bad? Am I going in the up elevator, the down elevator? We've sort of tried to completely abandon that strategy and that formula in the very beginning of Tanya, that we're not just looking for what do I got to do so I'll be good, and what do I got to avoid so I won't be bad. We're trying to see this, though, as a mechanism for understanding our relationship with Hashem and recognizing our challenges and so on. So you could remember it with the term tzibor. Tzibor translates as a community. It also could be an acronym for Tzaddik, Beinoni, Rasha. So if we were to summarize it in short, the Tzaddik has total control. The godly soul has total authority over every aspect of his existence. What he thinks about, what he says and what he does, the garments, and what he is inclined towards and what he enjoys. So his mind and his heart, he's in total and absolute alliance. And hopefully every person can touch this from time to time, if not my regular daily grind. The Rasha struggles and fails maybe very rarely, maybe a little less than very rarely, a little more often, maybe casually, maybe a little more intensely, where his self-serving character, his animal soul, takes control over what he thinks and what he says and what he does. And the Beinoni struggles like the Rasha, but performs like the Tzaddik. Well, now the Alter Rebbe, and again, we talked about the gradations and the lower level Tzaddik and the higher, and Bnei Aliyah and so on. And again, the value of this, because everyone has got to get up and do mitzvahs every day, the value of this is how I can understand my internal struggle and my alliance with Hashem. When can I trust my senses? And when can I say, well, the fact that I'm feeling a desire for this might be an indication that I'm biased and I'm not making a rational decision about whether or not this is good because I really want to do it for indulgence. Or when can I say, you know what, I think that I can trust myself here and follow my intuition. It's a very precarious thing. Life comes with instructions, but it's much more art than it is science. Oral law is much more profound than written law because we got to make these decisions in these moments. Well, here the Alter Rebbe has introduced a whole nother term called the Rasha Be'emes, truly wicked. Now, when we say truly wicked, we don't mean he's more wicked, and it doesn't mean that he does worse things. It means that his Rasha, which is his vulnerability to his animal soul, seizing the control tower of what he consciously thinks about, says, and does, and even what he's only able to bring up for consideration is emes. It is true. True meaning not that it's not false. True meaning there does not seem to be any way that this is going to stop. Now, when a person is confronted with a taiva, little boy, have some magic beans, as soon as you take away those magic beans, the raging urge of the animal soul is commonly going to calm a little bit. So it's not be'emes. At that moment when it's right in my face, the guy got me so angry, it looks so delicious, whatever it is. When we're talking about a Rasha be'emes, there is no reasonable expectation, or it's more than that. It's not going to ever change unless something radical happens. It's not going to pass once the temptation goes away. Now, the Alter Rebbe says, Kamaim Razal, like it says, Shorashoyim Haim Bereshus Libam, that these wicked people, this degree of wickedness, which again is not a degree of all the bad things they do, they are completely under the authority of their heart. They simply act no different than an animal, which is, I want it, I do it. Now, in Western society, this is sometimes lauded as a great degree of accomplishment. I do what I want, when I want, whatever I want to do. Oh, wow, that guy has really reached a high level. I just do whatever I want. I'm not beholden to anything. Now, that's never, of course, true, because even the rich guy has to stop at red lights, and even he gets rained on when it's raining outside. So, or that's why Steve Jobs will live forever. Oops, he didn't, right? Because even the richest guy is not in full control, but at least there is this fantasy that I can do what I want, and then we happen. Then they get caught, and they're like, "Well, I don't understand. I did whatever I wanted, and everybody thought it was great." Now, this guy, Ve'ein Libam Reshusam Klal, and he has no capacity to be authoritative over his impulses. He cannot rein it in at all. And this is a penalty for the intensity and the enormity of his sins. The classic example of this is Paro. Everyone remembers the story that Paro gets to the point in the plagues where he literally cannot choose otherwise. He cannot choose not to do the Averas anymore. He has lost that capacity entirely. So he has no regret. He has no capacity to change course. He's in so deep, as we would call it, that he forgot where he's coming from. He's completely lost the narrative. And again, we just have to look around at these, sort of highlight Hollywood trials. And again, I'm not excusing it, but it's like they can't even figure out, what do you mean? I've been doing this for all this time. Everybody said it was fine. A person I know, he had a cash business, and he had a cashier. And the cashier one day forgot his wallet. So he took $10 out of the register to buy lunch. And he figured, I'll pay it back tomorrow. Well, he forgot, and then again. And at a certain point, he started to think he's entitled to take $10 a day out of the cash register. Again, does that mean he's innocent? No. But that's how deep it was. He got so deep into his behavior that he completely lost the narrative. He completely lost that capacity to be aware of something that prior to this, he would say, well, of course, I'm not allowed to take $10 from somebody that doesn't belong to me. That's how deep it's become. We look around our society, and they're unaware and so on. And on the contrary, it's almost held up as a virtue. Wow, this guy's really accomplished. He doesn't have to be nice to anybody. He doesn't have to be decent to anyone. And that's seen as some sort of accomplishment in this world. Wow, that guy's really made it in life. V'loy dibra Torah b'mesim elu shebechayim kriyim mesim. And here the Alter Rebbe says something that's it's harsh, and really sort of makes this point. We have heard probably more commonly the phrase that the righteous, even after they die physically, they still live on eternally. We just had it in the Parsha last week, or the week before, where Moshe Rabbeinu, when he saw that Yehoshua would continue on, so he felt like he continued on. Yaakov Avinu is not dead because his children continue. Well, what's less well known is another Rashi. At the end of Parsha Bereshis, the Parsha, it tells us about, the end of Parshas Noach, it tells us about the birth of Avram. Of course, it comes up to become Abraham. And it tells us a little about his lineage, and that his father Terach died.
Recording in progress.
So Rashi asks the question, the timeline doesn't fit. Terach has not died at this point. So Rashi says, one interpretation that we sort of hide that because Avram's going to leave and it doesn't look so good that Avram's leaving his elderly father. That's one interpretation. And then Rashi says, but he was dead because the wicked, even when they are alive, they are dead. Now, just to take that one step further, because we know that when Abraham dies, it says he will lie with his fathers. And Rashi asks, well, what kind of blessing is that? His father was a bad guy. He was an idol worshiper, an idol salesman. And Rashi says, from here we see that Terach did tshuva. So death is not permanent in this sense. So this Rasha Be'emes, we are describing as dead, and we'll talk about that in a moment, it's not hopeless. The dead can be revived through tshuva. But how that tshuva is going to happen is going to take something more, I'll use the word severe, than Tanya, which we'll talk about. So let's go back to the whole concept of death. As we know, when God created the world, death was not innate to the world. The world reflected its godly origin. God is forever, so too the world and everything in the world would be forever. And God told Adam and Chava, don't eat from the tree. The day you eat from the tree, you will die. And of course, they ate from the tree. And then they lived to be 900 years old. So we say, what does that mean? And we explain that all matter is comprised of its physical side and its spiritual side. And the rule of thumb is that the spiritual is eternal and the physical is temporal. And when a person sides with their temporal impulses, like eating from the tree they were told not to eat from, then they have aligned themselves with death. And when a person is aligned with death, they will be, quote, dead. But there can be tshuva and they can come back to life. In that moment, though, they are aligned with death. That's why we can say that the righteous, even after they are physically died, because their identity is not their physicality. When we talk about Yaakov Avinu or Moshe Rabbeinu, we're not talking about how tall he was, or whether he was left-handed, if he had dark hair and blue eyes, or he had light hair and hazel eyes. We're talking about his message, and his message is eternal. Whereas when we talk about the wicked person is gone. That's it. Their identity is only about their impulse, and therefore it's gone. There is a oft-quoted story about a man named Eliezer ben Dodoi who was a bad guy. He was a self-indulgent guy. And he traveled the world in pursuit of every self-indulgence. And when he came to realize how meaningless it was, he literally cried himself to death. And he is lauded, he's called Reb Eliezer ben Dodoi, because that message lives on forever. Now, it's better to live, but it lives on forever. And all of his indulgences, as we know, are gone, right? That cupcake that the person ate, that harsh word that the person said, felt good for a moment, but it's gone in that time. So this guy who is so desensitized, he's so corroded with his intense averas, he needs something more than Tanya. He needs a smack upside the head. Tanya is for somebody who is what we would call basically in a spiritually healthy spot. Now, this could be the jolt that he needs. I mean, this is the Rebbe's message. We're going to stand out there and we're going to say, you're Jewish, you want to do a mitzvah. I mean, again, to use a contemporary analogy, unfortunately, it's a tragedy, but we can learn something. Look at the October 8th Jews, people who've suddenly woken up to their Jewish identity. They're going along singing a song, and suddenly they get a jolt. Now, we're not looking for it. We're not hoping for it. But it did zap them out of their complacency. That was not going to happen just by walking along. They're completely oblivious to it. Or it's the message of the high holidays. The king is in the field. It's the message of the sound of the shofar. We have to startle people, like the shofar sound, out of their, this is what I do, this is how I've done it. Now, of course, we're talking here about a person who is engaged in Aveira. It can metaphorically apply to a person who is, well, this is what I do, this is how I do it, I do my mitzvahs, I'm in my routine, and we all have our routines, which we generally like, which is why we have them as routines. and they can become a little bit of a prison. It's one of the great messages of Sukkot that we can't just keep doing what we do. We got to go outside of the fortress of our homes and shuls and schools and libraries out into the vulnerability so that we will not become rigid redundancies of what we've always simply been doing. So here the Alter Rebbe says, the Torah is not really speaking to them. Ki be'emes yefshel rashoyim lahaskel avad Hashem b'li she'asu tshuva la'avet tchil l'shabra klipa shem meslech mavdil u'mechitza shel bar so mafsekes beinam levina shema shemayim aydei shviras libay u'meriras nafsh al chatav k'mosh kosu b'zayar al pasuk zivkid alakim ruach nishbar alev dishmar b'goymer. Really, this person, again, this is sort of the Rebbe's whole message. We're going to stand on street corners and we're going to shock them out of their complacency. And we're going to say, hey, you're a Jew. And again, sadly, October 7th wakes people up. We want to be woken up in a positive, not in a negative. We're going to hunt them down in love, not in hate. But this is what's necessary. Something has to jolt them out of their, this is what I do, this is how I do it, routine. Because again, they're just going along doing their thing, totally unaware, totally without any conscious understanding of who they are and what they're doing until it's broken. Why? Because they have created this shield, this fence between them. The Alter Rebbe here uses a phrase that we'll see again. It's called Mesach Mavdil and Mechitza Shel Barzel. So these translate as a screen that separates and a wall of iron. Now, this is not merely meant to be poetry. These represent two different degrees of how a person can become desensitized or less sensitized to their godliness. One is what we Mesach Mavdil, the screen, which is a little less intense, is the form of what we call klipas noga. That is when a person indulges in behaviors that are not obviously godly, but the godliness can be seen there, like kosher food. But just because food is kosher doesn't mean the indulgence in it is always appropriate. Even though I made a bracha and I washed my hands and so on, but that aggression at the buffet line is not something of kedusha, and it becomes so crass. And again, not us, we're perfect, but we look around and thank God, the Jewish community has wealth and there can be indulgence, and it's not always a godly thing, that aggression of it. Remember the story of Achashverosh's party on Purim was kosher. It wasn't the food, it was the attitude. And then you have Mechitza Shel Barzel, an iron curtain or an iron wall. That's mamish Gimel Klipas Tmeis Lagamre. That's real ungodly behavior. And there's a curious mnemonic, Barzel, Beis Reish, Zayin Lamed, can be an acronym for Bilha, Rachel, Zilpa, Leah. Now, you'll note there that it's sort of out of order. Bilha is the handmaiden, but she's placed before Rachel. Zilpa is the handmaiden, she's placed before Leah. Well, that's the indication here. Everything is upside down, rather than seeing the material as a casing for the spiritual, like the Baal Shem Tov said, when a person desires food. What they're truly desiring is the godly spark that's latent in that food. There must be a lot of godliness latent in chocolate. That's what they're feeling the desire for. But when a person has it upside down and they see God as being here to serve me rather than me serve God, I get it backwards. The handmaiden is being served by the mistress. Bilhah is ahead of Rachel, Zilpah ahead of Leah. And when you're cleaning up for the cleaning lady, this is backwards. This is wrong. Well, that's what can happen with a person who becomes embedded in Shalosh Klipas Tmeis Lagamre. They got it upside down. They got it backwards. And then what? So how does this get broken down? So the pasuk in Tehillim says that the offerings to Hashem Zivchei Elokim is a broken spirit and a broken heart. Now here we have a curiosity. As we know, nothing will annoy people as much as talking about sacrifices. If you want to get a secular person really angry at you, just tell them that you're looking forward to the reinstatement of sacrifices. They get crazy. And as a indication of this, the general rule of thumb, but general, is that whenever the term of sacrifices is discussed in Torah, the name of Hashem is the four-letter name of Yud Kei Vav Kei, because it's acknowledging that this is not something that is rational. You recall that God creates the world, Bereshis bara Elokim. So this world, when it functions in some degree of rationale, when it functions in some degree of natural prediction, etc., it is Elokim. That's how the world is run. The world is run by Elokim. When the world is being touched by a godliness that is outside of the rational, that is the four-letter name of Hashem, and that's why it can't be pronounced, not because we don't know how to vowelize it, but because it's not part of the word system. Elokim can also mean a judge, just like the Lord can be the boss, or Almighty, or Adoni is also a sir or boss, and so on. But the four-letter name of Hashem, which is all the forms of tense concurrently, simultaneously, past, present, and future, is not of this world. And therefore, whenever sacrifices are discussed, or almost, the term is the Yud Kei Vav Kei, because it's not a rational thing, right? It's not rational. Here, though, it says, Zivchei Elokim, what is slaughter to Elokim, which again, that's sort of breaking our mold, because we're talking about sacrifices and we're using Elokim, is Ruach Nishbara, a broken spirit and a broken heart. Now, the term broken heart in Torah is different than the English term. In English, it means you're disappointed. Oh, it really broke my heart that I didn't get what I wanted. But in Torah, the concept of a broken heart is the antithesis of the hardened heart. Paro has a hardened heart. We have a broken heart. So a broken heart means it's something that's open. It's wide open. It's not clenched. And well, this is how we do it, and I'm not changing. And again, that's what happened to this guy. This Rasha Be'emes, like Paro, is so deep that they literally have lost control of themselves. So they're only able to deal with the Elokim level. And at the Elokim level, we need to break open that heart. And that's what we need to do. He's not ready to deal with the Yud Kei Vav Kei level. So we have to appeal to his human, appreciable character. So we talked to him about the wisdom of Torah. We talked to him about the joy of Torah. We talked to him about the enjoyable aspects of Torah. We need to break that clenched heart open so that there will be an offering to Elokim. That's the world he's living in. He's not ready to live in the Yud Kei Vav Kei world. He has his brain is not in his head. It has been captured by his heart. It is not in his head. It's been completely dominated by his impulses, by this is what I want, and that's what I'm going to do. And that's how he's going to break down this tumah. So the Rasha Be'emes is hopeless as a Rasha Be'emes. And that's why the world said, well, forget it. This guy's lost. Look at the sins that he does, and he doesn't care. It's not like he does it and he feels guilty. He's long ago forgotten about any sense of guilt. He has no regret. He's not interested. It's meaningless to him. But deep down within, there's that godly spark. But it's buried under so many layers that we need to drill down to get to it. So he's hopeless as a Rasha Be'emes. But we have to break out that Rasha Be'emes, and that's not necessarily going to be through Tanya. Just as an analogy, we have an odd halacha in the laws of tsaras. So the whole laws of tsaras, which we'll talk about in a moment, defy anything logical. So what is tsaras? It is a physical manifestation of a spiritual out of orderness, dis-ease, not being at ease. Just like we know that a person can have a psychological problem that manifests itself physically. So he feels sick because he's scared, because he's nervous, because he's afraid, or whatever it is. So too, if a person becomes so spiritually detached, he can have a physical sign of this issue. And there's a whole series of diagnoses to determine, is this something dermatology should address? Is it physical or is it spiritual? We don't know. So we have a whole system. And then once we identify that it's a spiritual issue, then we have a course of action. And then we find a total anomaly. Then again, the whole thing, essentially, you just have to accept it and then work within the rules. But then there's an anomaly that makes it even stranger. If the person has a blotch of this tsaras on their body, they are considered tameh, and we begin this process where they have to be isolated in a series of sacrifices, etc. If they are covered head to toe in tsaras, they are deemed pure. So, well, this doesn't make any sense. One blotch, they're tameh. The whole body, why? So, amongst the many explanations, one is, look, this is just the rules and doesn't have to conform to anything logical, is a life lesson. A person has a little problem. You can tell them, hey, you got a problem. Person's covered head to toe. They don't need a book. Here's 500-page book. Now fix this. They don't need a book. They need to be accepted. They need to have a transformation. Then as they start getting a little better, then they're ready for some rebuke or whatever it might be. We have a similar law. If a person gets so destitute that he has to sell himself as a slave, and he's so destitute, he sells himself to idol worshippers, so the family is strongly encouraged for their own reputation to redeem him. So we say we go to the uncle, we go to the brother. We say, well, what about father? Why don't you say father? So one interpretation is that this is a metaphor. In this time, he doesn't need a father's lecture. He needs his uncle, that, like we even say in English, avuncular. He needs unconditional love at this point. And then once he gets healthy, then we'll give him a lecture. But he's not ready for a lecture at this point. At this point, he just needs to have this issue addressed. And that's what the Alter Rebbe is saying about this guy who is the Rasha Be'emes. So this level is Bechinas Tshuva Tata. This is the very beginning. We got to resuscitate his, a person eats some too much food, they get a stomach ache, spend a couple of days eating vegetables and healthy, they get back. A person, God forbid, gets poisoned, we can't just feed him chicken soup and get him better. He's got to have a real intervention. This guy needs a real intervention. And that's the very beginning. What's happened is his basic essential awareness that I am a Jew and therefore I am aligned with Hashem has been lost. It's fallen into gullus. He can't even be identified. That's what it means when we say that God is in gullus. The most basic element of his awareness that I'm a Jew and I want to be aligned with Hashem has been lost. It's like a person's basic sense of awareness of his parent, of his community. It's totally been lost. The most elementary of truths has been forgotten. Well, we need to reinvigorate that. We need to bring it back to life. K'mayim Razal, like it says, Gola Edom, Shchini Moim. When the Jewish people were driven out into Edom, Edom means red. It's a nation. It's the nation that descends from Esau. Esau is about indulgence. So when we get so deep into indulgence that the godly natural sense gets lost, just like, again, a person eats some junk food, they have a stomach ache. A person, God forbid, poisons themselves, they have lost the natural functioning of their digestive system. They need to reinstate the nature of their digestive system. Now, again, I'm not here to study medicine, but we understand that there is nothing better than the natural functioning of the respiratory system, the digestive system, the circulatory system. Again, we're not here to discuss medicine. If we can invigorate the natural functions of the person's body, that's far better than anything artificial. So a person, again, like I said, a person gets a paper cut, it heals. A person has something more severe, they need more severe interaction. But the goal is the same, to reinstate the natural systems. Well, the natural system of a Jew is, I have a godly soul, it's part of Hashem, and it longs to be in alliance with the infinity of Hashem. That's its intuitive desire, just like the body longs to be healthy, and therefore it gets, rebels against something that's indigestible. When it takes something in that is indigestible, it rebels. It pushes back against it. When a person acts in a way of Edom, Edom again is a nation, the word means red, comes from Esau, and it represents indulgence. There are different types of character traits. Edom represents like Roman debauchery. Shchine mom, the Hashem is with him. Danik shadam so my adam murder mamshich l'sham bechinas v'nitzutz alakus hamachayis nefesh ruach neshama shaloi hamulubashim by nefesh abahamis maklipa shabalibai shabachol hasmoli. Remember the 5 levels of the neshama. 3 of them are encased in our humanity. Nefesh, what we do. Ruach, what we desire. Neshama, what we think about. And when he indulges that in the physical, he becomes so sick that it becomes lost. There's a quick story, maybe it's even a true story. When the previous Rebbe came to America to fundraise, there was a Jew in New York who was a very successful clother. And the Frierdiker Rebbe wanted to meet with him. So he called this, that. Finally, the guy said, okay, I'll give you 2 minutes. So the Frierdiker Rebbe comes to his factory. The guy comes down. I'm very busy. What do you want? What do you want? So the Frierdiker Rebbe says, could you sew my button on my coat? The guy says, Rabbi, you expect me to believe you came here all the way from Eastern Europe so I would sew a button on your coat? He says, do you expect me to believe your neshama came all the way down from Shemayim so you should sew buttons on coats? You're here for something greater than sewing buttons on coats. Your neshama came down from Shemayim, not so you can sew buttons on coats. But what happens? You get so engaged in sewing buttons on coats, you think your whole life is about sewing buttons on coats. And again, we get so indulged in it, we forgot what we're doing. That's what's happened to this guy. He's so encased and submerged in his Edom that he forgot what he's doing here. He completely lost the narrative. It's in the left side of his heart. Hamalechas boy, that is taken over. It is the king now. Boy the Russia, it is completely captured his every character trait. Again, he thinks his whole life is about sewing buttons on coats. He's totally lost his awareness because he's so fully engaged in what's going on. So his nefesh, what he does, his ruach, what he wants, his neshama, what he thinks about, is completely submerged. But he's got 2 other levels of his neshama, the 2 that are outside of his humanity. Again, a very sukkahs kind of message. You got to go outside of you because you get so stuck in sewing buttons on coats, you forgot. So we got to enact that. How do we do it? We stop total strangers on the street and we say, excuse me, are you Jewish? If you ask this guy when he woke up that morning, what's he going to do today? He was not thinking about shaking the lulav and esrog or putting on tefillin. That was not at all in his agenda. If you say, tell me 20 things that might happen to you today, that was not one of them. And all of a sudden, you startled him. Even if he says, go away, leave me alone, the fact that he thought about being Jewish already startled him. You've already begun the healing process. You're not just here to sew buttons on coats. When you break that, again, breaking your heart is not like in English where, oh, he broke my heart, I'm disappointed. When you break that open, you get out of that mindset. And you break down this spirit of impurity and filth, and it scatters. What happens? A miracle, something you never would have believed, that only the Rebbe believed in. He come in nifilasa, it will come back up. You thought it's dead. This guy's gone. Forget it. Look at his behavior. Look at his attitude. Look at everything about him. He is completely lost. That was a reasonable conclusion. Again, we were a little self-righteous. Oh, we know that. We didn't know. The Rebbe beat into our heads. We also thought we had to sew buttons on coats. We also thought that was our identity. We also got so caught up in what we were doing, we forgot what was going on. So we looked at that guy and said, look at him. All he does is sew buttons on coats. All he does is his own indulgences. He has no awareness of his godliness. It's lost. It's gone. He's numb. He's completely killed it off. And again, that's why there are people in Torah world who would say, he's not even Jewish. Look, he doesn't care about anything. He's completely lost his neshama. And the Alter Rebbe is telling us, no, it's not something he earned, and therefore it's not something he can lose. It is his innate identity, and you can resuscitate it. Just like, again, the miracles of modern medicine. We're not here to study medicine. We thought the guy was gone. He's breathing again. He's walking again. The body has incredible rehabilitative capacity. Sometimes it needs a little help. Sometimes it's not so bad, and it passes. Sometimes it needs a little help, and thank God for the geniuses who come up with medical ways of helping. And what is our ultimate goal? To reinvigorate the natural function. And it will come back, V'gam Nitzvah, and it will stand tall. It won't just come back and be halfway. Oh, well, I guess it's not so bad. No, it will come back strong. And the stories of our great sages who led all kinds of crooked lives, and then not only that they came back and were they came the leaders. Gam Nitzvah, it stands tall, as explained in other places.